Welcome to the Zebulon Mayor Show. I'm Bob Matheny, Mayor of Zebulon, and today joining me is Joe Moore, our town manager of 10 weeks.
10 weeks.
10 weeks. And I just wanted to, I know that we've been going around the town and letting Joe meet people, but thought this might be a way for some of you that have not had the opportunity to meet him in person, to do so by TV and hopefully in person at some later point. So, having said all of that, Joe, welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here today. We wanted to give the folks a little of your background and come forward with also some of your thinking and the process that you go through and acclimating yourself to the town and vice versa, I might add. So let's just start with your history and let's talk about. I know you came from a great high school.
Yes, a fellow Sabre from South Mecklenburg.
That's right, folks. In case you missed that, we both went to the same high school. So you came out of Charlotte.
So I came out of Charlotte. I left Charlotte to go to Raleigh, to go to NC State. I know that probably caused you some personal angst, but
we're cool. My wife got her PhD there, and my son got his master's there. So
well, that's all right. I went there for engineering school. And when I got out of engineering school, I went to work in the private sector. I worked for a couple of consultants. And our primary client was North Carolina Department of Transportation. And one of the things that I liked about that job is I got to go all across the state, and we actually did work for other departments of transportation. So I did a lot of work up and down the eastern seaboard. One thing I did not like about that line of work, though, is typically because there was federal funds involved, you had to do public hearing. And one of the things that I did not like is when I would offer a solution, an engineering solution to a particular community, I hadn't spent any time in that community, so I didn't know anything about the community's history. I didn't know anything about how that community operated, and I just got a strong sense that if I was going to practice my engineering skill, I wanted to do it in a community where I lived. And so about that time, we were living in Raleigh. Opportunity emerged with the town of Cary, entry-level engineer position. Took that job and loved it, and it was everything that I wanted it to be. That I got to practice my engineering, but I got to go out and work with the neighborhoods that I not only lived in, but that were around me. And I was able to work with people to come up with solutions. And as I stayed with the town of Cary, I just worked my way up through the ranks. And as I got closer and closer to being a department head, I started working with other departments as well. So I came to realize that engineering was just one facet of a service that's offered to a community. I started working with parks and recreation departments and helping them build community centers. I started working with police and fire to help them with their facilities, and the more I got involved with other departments, I came to realize that I really wanted to be in a role where I could work with all the departments all the time. And that's when I became interested in city management. And it was real difficult to pursue a Master's of Public Administration, which is the educational background that's typically followed for someone who wants to be a city or a town manager. It was hard for me to get the time to pull away from work. Well, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, who's got a very strong Master's of Public Administration program, they offered a program where you could take time away from your work and go to school part-time and continue to work part-time. And so I jumped at the opportunity. When I graduated from there, opportunity emerged with the city of Brevard. It's a small town, about 5,000 people, about 7,500 people, and they are located about 20-25 miles southwest of Asheville. Beautiful community, had a great time there, but have always been interested in coming back to the Triangle. This is just where we were for a long period of time, and I just felt good about being in a growing and thriving community. And that's one of the big reasons that piqued my interest specifically about the town of Zebulon. Town of Zebulon is the easternmost town in Wake County, as you know, and it's got a tremendous amount of growth potential. And I wanted to be right on the leading cusp of that. So very expansive, but hopefully short history of where I was and how I got to be here.
I think you did skip one degree in there, though. You also got a master's in engineering as well from state before you went for the MPA. Am I correct?
I did.
Yeah.
I
Right,
did.
right.
One of the things that I think is interesting about the engineering profession, and you could apply it to other professions as well, is it's such a technical-oriented profession that you always have to keep your education up. And
Right.
I just saw the writing on the wall. Plus, I was interested that I was going to need to get an advanced degree in my field of study.
Right, I understand. Well, let's talk a little bit about your family. I don't want to get too personal here, but you might just tell people about your family life.
Yeah, so wife Abigail, I met her at NC State. Um, I guess I'm not too proud to say this, but I'll go ahead and cut to the chase. Going through engineering program, at least at that time, there weren't many women in the program. And I could see pretty quickly that I was going to have to be more aggressive to to win Abigail over. And but I was very shy. I didn't want to reach out.
Right.
And finally, I realized that when a fellow classmate came in and put down a bag of Hershey Kisses in front of her and asked her for a kiss, that I said, well, I'm going to have to move now or I'm going to lose her. So I asked her out. Thankfully, she said yes, and we stayed in the Triangle, specifically in Cary. We raised our
Right.
family.
Right.
Got our daughter, Emma, who's now a freshman at Meredith College. Very
Right.
proud of her.
Right. And I met her. You have a really nice family, too.
Well, thank you. I
You
appreciate
do.
that.
So, but, thanks for that brief history.
Yeah.
I think people would like to know that. And you got a place up in Wakefield that you stay now.
Right.
And, well, that's great, and we're glad, of course, to have you here. Now, since you've been here, we've been busy.
We have been busy.
We've covered a lot of territory and a lot of organizations, and I'll let you just talk about that because I want to lead into your impressions as well.
Sure. Well, one of the things that could be a fatal flaw for a manager is to come in and assert what they know or what they think they know. There's a lot to be said going back to my prior experience when I was a consultant for NCDOT to understanding the community. And one way to understand the community is to get out into the community. So through your assistance, I've gotten entree into a lot of the civic groups out there. Met with Rotary, met with Lions Club, met with Women's Club, have visited some of the businesses like Nameco and Nomacork and GlaxoSmithKline and Theo Printers and U.S. Foods, and also the representative to business communities in general, the Chamber of Commerce. And that was really an opportunity for me to not only introduce myself, but to hear back from them. And one of the things that I hear over and over again is that this community recognizes where it is situated in the county. And I don't mean geographically, I mean on the cusp of growth. Not only has this town had a strong and long history of a very good industrial base, but it is on the cusp now of a strong residential base about to boom. And I think part and parcel that's tied to the fact that there's not much developable land left in Wake County, but people still want to stay in Wake County. I also think Zebulon is in a really strong position based upon where it's tied and located next to its U.S. highway system, and where that is located between two popular interstates. And so when I go out and meet with these groups, you hear that energy, that they realize that that growth is coming, they want to be a part of that. And so that's one big lesson that I learned. Second big lesson is these people love their community. It's the slogan, the town of friendly people, is not just a slogan. People really are friendly, but they really care about their community. So that's the second big takeaway.
Well, talk about explosive growth, and a lot of people just don't realize that we actually have 5 subdivisions under development right now. Now, 2 of them are close to being built out, Braemar and Shepherd's Point, but they're not completely built out.
Right.
There's more to go. And then Shepherd's Park is coming forward.
Mm-hmm.
Weaver's Pond is coming forward. And Terran Meadows is coming forward. And there's another whole phase, for that as well. So you're right. There's a lot going. And I've always been very proud of our industrial base, but I've always felt, well, you need better balance.
That's right.
Because you can lose one house, and nobody wants to lose anything, but
Right.
you can lose one house easier than you can lose one industry. And so, there's the double-edged sword there, I guess you would say.
That's right.
But we are very fortunate in our industrial growth, and just in the last year or so with BB&T,
Mm-hmm.
Glaxo continuing to expand. I mean, it's Nameco Nomacorp is looking for more expansion, so we're happy and proud. What
As
can
you
I
should
say?
be,
So, well, as we should be.
That's right.
Let's say it that way. Well, you've given your early impressions of the town then, and let's talk about what problems you might see or how you would approach problems. What's your philosophy in management, I guess is the best way to put that.
Sure. So while I don't necessarily practice engineering on a day-to-day basis, I can't get away from the fact that I'm an engineer. I am geared, no pun intended, to be a problem solver.
Right.
I've never shied away from a problem. I feel as though there's always a solution or solutions to any problem, and so I always dive in. The other thing, and this ties more to my management philosophy, I believe that everybody wants to do a good job. And if you can give people direction and you can give them support and then turn them loose to do the good job that they want to do, they will typically do a good job. And if they don't do the job or don't do the job as effectively as possible, that's where my role as a manager comes in, to coach them, but not to discipline them. And I have yet to be surprised that there's people out there that by and large they want to do a good job. So that being said, I don't shy away from problems, and I believe people can help in solving those problems. And that applies not only to staff, but to the community as well. Community is a part of solving the problems as well. Government is not set up and can't be expected to solve it all. It's really a partnership between public sector, private sector, and nonprofit sector. And there's plenty of problems out there. We're coming out of a recession that really walloped us. And while it is a beneficial thing to have a strong industrial base, one of the downsides is that that industrial base, they have to tighten their belts as well. And one of the big revenue sources for us is the personal property tax associated with those businesses. And so when they are tightening their belts, they tighten it in ways like extending the life of their machinery, or they don't reinvest.
Right.
And as a result of that, you see depreciation in tax value. And what that is it reduces the amount of revenue that comes into the town, and then as a result has an effect on the services that the town can offer its citizens. One of the remarkable things that you all have done is maintaining that service level in spite of all that ratcheting down. So that's one problem that I see out there, is how to build that tax base back up, the existing tax base, but also what are things we can do to grow it even more.
Well, you're right. And when that tax base decreases, you have two choices. You either raise taxes or you cut services. We've been, I think, done a fairly good job of not having to do either, really. We held the service level, and I think we had a tax increase 2 years ago. I think it's right. Penny and a half, if my memory serves me correct. But it was necessary. We're still suffering from the loss of the whole harmless money.
Mm-hmm.
There's just no doubt about that, and I guess people are tired of hearing me talk about it. But
it's true.
But it's true.
Yep.
And fortunately, we had a good unassigned fund balance that we could draw on to get us through. And as you've heard me say over and over again, I'm looking to get to the the end of the tunnel. That light's down there. You just hope it's not the train. But,
That's right.
You know, and we've been working that way. It's been tough. It really has been tough. But you've been here long enough now to get a real grip on the finances, and you know, the outlook is good. It's good for us. I've called Zebulon the final frontier of Wake County for a long time.
I think that's a good assessment.
And that's just the way I see it. We have developers looking at us, and in light of the what I said earlier about the residential developments, you know, we have this Beaver Dam outfall sewer line going in, and I can't really believe that would be 100% residential hooking to it, but it will allow for another 4,500 homes on top of that. So, you know, my friend Vivian Jones, the mayor of Wake Forest, is fond of saying, well, if I'm going to have a problem, I'd rather it be a problem of growth than a problem of no growth.
That's
so
right.
That's what we want to deal with. Well, you and I are going to have future shows on various aspects of the community, but I thought we'd just kind of touch through some of them, and you touched on tax-based growth, transportation. We're really wrestling that animal north of Rendell, so I'll let you kind of touch on that, and then we'll have a show on it.
Sure. So, very briefly, growth is a good thing, and I agree with you and Mayor Jones that I would much rather deal with growth issues than non-growth issues. But growth brings issues regardless, and one of the things that we'll continue to see, and we already are seeing, is on North Arundel Avenue, which is particularly at that intersection near Pierce's Road. There's a lot of traffic congestion out there.
Right.
And so that's going to be an example of things that we're going to have to address moving forward.
And we are moving on it. We'll elaborate later. I don't want to turn this show into a transportation plan show, but it's really high on the agenda, and we're moving forward with it. We've been working on greenways, and we've got a couple of things going on with that, so I'll let you talk about that as well.
Yeah, so we've just approved a Greenway master plan, and master plans are necessary. They're necessary because they lay out the framework of how to move forward in the future. They also, from a more practical standpoint, are an effective means and sometimes a necessary means to get grant funding. The danger always exists with master plans about once you complete the master plan, you stick it on a shelf and it stays there. And so we will in future shows, and we'll be talking about this at the retreat in February, about how do we move that master plan forward.
And just to throw in, because it's imminent, we're going to take a tour. You might just talk about that a little bit, and then we can talk about how it went later on.
Sure. So what we've planned for not only the governing board, but also some members of the business community, and we're going to meet with elected officials along the way. We're going to take a tour of greenways in the area. One notable example is the work that the town of Wake Forest has undertaken. And so that will be an opportunity for you and the commissioners, as well as members of the business community, to see how these greenways look. Sometimes there's fears associated with the unknown, specifically as it relates to greenways, about how will it impact me or my property. And I think the town of Wake Forest, as a specific example, has done a great job of incorporating greenways, but seeing is believing. And so we've set up a tour, and we'll be taking that on October 29th.
And I'll just add that Vivian Jones and Candace, her transportation person, is going to meet us in Wake Forest, and then Sig Hutchinson from Wake County is going to join us as well. So multifaceted. And we'll have a show later on to talk about
Good.
that when we elaborate on the greenways. Downtown, you know, every mayor that I talked to, and I was at Wake County Mayors last night, every one of them is concerned and working on their downtown. And of course, we can draw on some of their successes or failures to map our way, but let's talk about that just a little bit.
So real briefly, symbolically, whether you have a downtown that is thriving or not can represent how your community is doing culturally. And so symbolically, there's a rationale for why you want to invest in downtown. But from a more economic standpoint, when we talk about growing the tax base, if there are things that a community can do to its downtown area, put money towards that, the return on investment is a lot stronger in a downtown area than it is on the outskirts of the city. And the reason for that is the tax value per square foot in a downtown area is just that much stronger because you've got a lot of uses combined into one small area.
Right.
And so there's an economic rationale behind investing in downtowns. And so that'll be yet another retreat topic, but you and I will have the opportunity to get into more detail on that as well.
Right. And just really want people to know that we consider it top-notch importance.
It is.
That's not the right way to say it, but we really care about the downtown, and it's definitely on our radar to do whatever we can to improve it. I will say that we've had some improvements recently, but we still have quite a ways to go, and we're going to be looking ways to do that. So folks understand it's very important to us, to the downtown. Well, let's talk about the UFO, UDO, Unified Development Ordinance. So elaborate on that.
Sure, and a lot of people think of it as a UFO because it's not something that they think that affects them on a daily basis. It's something that's just out there that's unknown. So a little bit of background on what it is, but why, more importantly, why it's so important and affects people on a daily basis. So the Unified Development Ordinance is just a unification of all the development guidelines into one document. And it is, for lack of a better way to explain it, the playbook by which developers play by. And there's a lot of good things that come from development. There comes increased tax base, there comes new people that come into your community that participate in that community and provide sweat equity to build that community up. As an example, participating in volunteer events or in nonprofit organizations. But there's also challenges that come with growth as well. So you see increased traffic, you see increased stormwater runoff. And so the question then becomes, who takes care of that congestion? Who takes care of that stormwater runoff? As two small examples of development issues. And the Unified Development Ordinance sets that balance. It says, for example, in very broad terms, development takes care of this portion, the existing community takes care of this portion. And so we'll be starting that process, and not a moment too soon, because as you mentioned, we already have got some development underway, more is coming, and so we'll have the opportunity to talk more about the Unified Development Ordinance, why it's relevant, and how it's progressing.
Well, and just to add to that, it's not just, and you did sort of touch on this, but it's not just good for the town, it's really good for the developer because, you know, then it's in one place. I like to call it a codification of development ordinances, which makes sure there's not something said over here and conflicting
That's
over
right.
here. So, we've been working on it for a while, but hopefully we're on track again and moving in that direction. I'm going to stop a second. How are we doing on time?
I think we're doing pretty good.
We're about at a wrap.
Yeah, I think we started just a little after 3, and it's almost, or I mean, a little after 2, and it's almost 2:30 now. So
Okay.
I would say maybe about, you guys maybe been talking about 25 minutes.
Yeah, and that's fine. Well, all I'm going to do is ask you if there's something else you'd like to say,
Okay.
and then I'll turn into a wrap.
All right.
And you can edit all that out.
Sounds good.
Well, Joe, it's been one. It's very nice to have you here, and I've said it over and over. Welcome, and I'm glad to have you on board. Is there anything you'd like to add before we leave?
Well, I'm thrilled to be here. I really am. I've wanted to come back to the Triangle in general, but I have been absolutely pleasantly surprised by the town of Zebulon. When we were in Cary, we used to come here every now and then for Mudcats games, but you'd have to pack your lunch back in the day, especially getting through Nightdale before the bypass. It was hard, but this is an absolutely charming community, but it's also very well connected with the growing region. So I'm glad to be here, and I look forward to more conversations on this show to get into some of the details of things that we want to talk about.
And we'll sure do it. Well, folks, I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope you found this information useful, and we'll see you next month.